Let's do a zoom real quick. So we'll unparent both of these again. Go to none. Let's delete the keyframes. Oops. Another quick tip is to hit U if you don't know what you had keyframes on. You can just select a layer and hit U and it'll pull up the attribute that had keyframes on it. So we also need to get this back into the default position. So we'll pull up the positions here and see what it is. It's 960, 540, and the rotation is 0. So now we're back to default. Let's zoom in to one of these. Let's get rid of this. Let's zoom in to one. Let's zoom in. Say, the next topic we're going to talk about is how to. We'll zoom in to, let's say we could zoom in on the blue here. Let's say we wanted a different background on the transition we're going into. So we want it to be yellow. Let's go to the yellow portion of this, okay? So we're going to parent this to the null now. And we are going to scale and position this where we want it to be. Let's say, so we hit a keyframe on both of those. We'll go to frame 15. Let's zoom back out here so we see the entire thing. And let's scale up this now. So now we can go all the way in. Okay, so look what's happening too. When we talk about scaling, look how fuzzy all of this stuff is getting. And why that is because it's not being constantly rasterized. So to do that, we hit this little box here. So look what that does. It's like magic. It's amazing. Now that we're scaling up, let's move it down kind of into the center as well as we zoom into it. So now that we zoom in, here we go. Now we got an all yellow background. And so now we can create a new solid background that is yellow. And we'll say yellow background. And to start and end, we can click and drag right here. So we'll swap it over one frame. The transition will happen right here in this frame. So once we get to that point, look how quick it zooms into because it's such a large distance. So let's do an easy ease again. So we'll start a little slower. And now it's easing in, and now we switched to this. We can tell because this is no longer over it, and that's just the null. That's not that big of a deal, but it's nice to kind of keep everything organized. So we know the null that controls that, these two are together. So it ends there. Now we have a new background. From this point forward, we can use, do a new anything, and that's yellow text. So we can go over here and change the text color to blue, and we just need to move it up on top. And then a little shortcut is Option Alt bracket there to do that, or we could click and drag it into place. And we'll just get that centered up and using the paragraph over here. We could also use the align options if we had multiple objects we needed to distribute together and make them evenly spaced. That's how to transition from one background color to another background color. And we did that using the null, remember? And we just covered constant rasterizing. We're covering a lot of topics very quickly. So, feel free to go back and review some of this stuff. And some of this may seem simple. We're just doing these simple moves. But when you combine all of these ingredients together on top of each other, it really creates an appealing animation. While we're on the text, what if we got to this yellow background and we didn't want just text to pop on here? We want it to follow a path into the screen. Okay, so we'll animate from off screen. Let's grab the pen tool and we'll start clicking a path. Click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. And if you click and drag and you've made a mistake, you can hit spacebar and then it'll move it, and as long as you have the mouse still down. So let's say I hit one over here and I'm like, oh no, I've got it clicked and dragged. That's not where I wanted it. Hit spacebar and we can move that out of the way. All right. So how do we get this text on that path? We'll go to Text, Path Options, Path, and we'll choose Mask 1. That's what we just made, is that mask. That's what that's called, the mask 1. And we can see that down here in masks, okay? and it has that color. We can change the color, you know, in case that came in yellow or something, we can't see it on the background, change it to something we can see for the time being. Now we have our text on the graph. So all we have to do is keyframe it. We get it off of the frame here, keyframe, and then we go down a little ways. Let's go to here. Let's kind of let it drift a little bit, and then it will fly off. That's that easy. Let's do easy ease, click and drag all the keyframes. I'm going off screen here, just going to keyframe assist, easy ease, switches it all, and look at that, boom, boom. Okay. Flies in, flies out. So that's how to animate text in and out. You can also do, we're covering a ton of stuff in this. This is great. So let's delete this mask, and let's cover one of my favorites. We'll do a little 3D animation. To do 3D, click this box. Now this is a 3D layer. What that means is we have another transform option. Position here has X, Y, and now we have a Z. Same thing with rotation. We have X, Y, and Z rotations. Whereas before, if we turn this off, look, we just have one rotation. We have X and Y. If we hit this box, now we can do 3D movements. And so that's pretty amazing. So one of my favorite things to do is to rotate text in. You see this effect all the time. Let's choose the pan behind tool and click and drag the pivot point up to the top of the text. We can zoom in if we wanted to, middle mouse, pan up, and get that right there. And then zoom back out. And we'll go to, it's not the Z rotation, it's not the Y rotation, although we could do those as well. Let's go to the X rotation. Look at that. We can keyframe it at 90 degrees. Let's go down to the beginning here where we transition out of the how to this. Let's go X rotation. I'll just give this a few frames to start. And then let's go to 20. We'll go to 0 and I'll rotate in. Boom, boom. So it almost looks like it's scaling now because we don't really see, it doesn't really feel like it's rotating. So how do we fix that? Okay, first off, we're gonna need to do the same thing that we did earlier, that overshoot. Remember overshoots? This works with rotation as well. So let's set a keyframe a few frames after the last one. We'll go back and then we'll click and drag this a little bit past. Let's make sure we're going in the right direction too. We'll go a little bit past, let's say 10. Now let's try it. It's pretty good, could be better, so let's keep going. Now it feels like it's rotating, right? But it has that linear kind of bad feeling to it. So I'm just gonna select these two. So it will start linear, but now these have been created to be easy ease. And it still doesn't feel right. Why is that? It's a little harsh, right? Boom, it hits too hard. So we can click and drag these down. We can also add more overshoots. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 frames down. We'll add another overshoot. So now we're on 0 there. Remember to make sure you're going in the right direction here. And you don't want to go past the value you did before. It should always be going down. So we go past it here to -23. Now we go back to 10, positive, and then we go to 0, okay? So, and then let's click and drag this out and make it a little more smooth. We're covering so much, it's kind of amazing. So that's just, remember in the graph editor here, that just represents each one of these ticks is a tick here. And we're just seeing this value over time. This is 50 degrees over time, right? The X axis is time, the Y axis is the value. Okay, so look, now look at that. That looks way better, and we can see that it's rotating. The other little trick we can do is let's add motion blur. Let's do that real quick. That's this little button over here. We'll use motion blur, but again, we can't see it. Why can't we see it here? because we're not seeing it. We haven't clicked the preview, enable motion blur in the preview. So we'll click that. Now we have it. See how that blurs now with that rotation? Boom. All right, so that's how you do a 3D move with text. We've covered a lot. Look at that transition we've already created now. So those are a couple transitions. You got to get creative. Combine these things together and create your own types of transitions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.